Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of an analysis as to why the South African teams are struggling so much against the British and Irish Lions, who have scored 8 tries and then 11 tries in the first 3 games of the tour. And a lot of negativity surrounding SA Rugby, a lot of big comments about SA Rugby down in the dumps, and it's a joke and it's pathetic, and there's it just shows you how weak SA Rugby is and stuff like that. And I think that is all very, very much a misinformed opinion. There are so many. I don't want to excuse the performances by our unions, but there are so many factors you have to consider when you're looking at what we are actually seeing. This is, first of all, the most unusual tour that has ever happened in terms of no fans, in terms of very little preparation for sides, in terms of players being unavailable due to having to isolate, not just injuries, but isolate. People could be perfectly fit, perfectly healthy, ready to play, but as a result of being in close contact with somebody for COVID-19, for example, they themselves tested positive, they're not available, then their close contacts could also, they won't even have the issue, but also have to isolate. There are so many factors to consider. And today we're going to be looking at the SA squads, what they maybe should look like, what they currently look like. And we're also going to have a look at the 2017 British and Irish Lions tour, when they went over to New Zealand and lost a couple of games against the franchise teams, and kind of look at why that might have been and what sort of the differences in this tour. So if you don't like hard facts, then click away. But if you'd like to actually sort of have a look and sort of get a sort of more well-rounded idea as to why there's been such big score lines, then continue watching and smash like on the video and subscribe to the channel. So first of all, let's just do a little bit of a recap of what's happened in the last 12 months in case you've been living under a rock. Last year, South African sides were doing all right in the Super Rugby. I think they were actually having quite a good time, especially the Sharks and the Stormers have finally seemed to be sort of doing quite well. We had the Sharks who were topping the Super Rugby before lockdown. We had the Stormers who had one big, against some very big opposition. We had the Lions team, which was struggling because they had lost so many players. And we had a Bulls side, which was misfiring. And then we had lockdown. COVID-19, rugby stopped all over the world. And when it returned, we had to, as a result, we couldn't get Super Rugby going again. As a result, the South African sides have been playing against each other for pretty much a year, about 9 months. So September up until now, they've only been able to play against themselves, apart from the Bulls went over and played Benetton. As a result of COVID-19, SA Rugby gave a lot of opportunity, gave all the players the chance to sort of basically just walk away from their contracts and take up offers overseas. And we saw a lot of players, because of the financial insecurity, leaving. You think of Andre Esterhuizen from the Sharks. You think of Malcolm Marx Kwagga-Smith from the Lions. You think of Makazole Mapimpi going on a sabbatical from the Sharks as well. Some very big players have left, or a lot of the big unions. And then we now look at the current situation. So that was sort of the preparation that these sides have had. Then we look at the current situation. So as a result of COVID-19, you obviously have to isolate and stuff like that. But also, as a result, Springboks named a 46-man squad. A 46-man squad that linked up before the British and Irish Lions said, because the Springboks haven't played, they weren't available. They weren't going to be made available to their local unions. So not a single player in that 46-man Springbok squad, and yes, a lot of them are overseas based, were available for their local unions. Now factor in also the sort of the bulk of the Springbok squad who don't even play their rugby in South Africa, all the rugby players that currently play overseas. Last year an article listed 118 South African players who plied their trade in top divisions across the world. And that's all sort of Japan, the Premiership, Top 14, Super Rugby, all that sort of thing. 118 players were playing in top leagues outside of South Africa. That is more than 2 full squads. That's almost 3. It's pretty much 3 full squads. Not even like 23, 30 man. Like full. That's 3 full 40 sort of squads. That's what we're kind of looking at. Playing overseas. So it's a whole 3 different teams. A whole 3 different franchises we could have from players overseas, if you include the Springboks. What we're also going to be doing is we're actually going to be doing a video on a South African overseas barbarian side. We actually might even make 2 sides of players based overseas who are not involved in the Springboks. Have a look at that. So that's the sort of backdrop. So if we look at the sides that played against the Lions last week, and we'll start with the Lions side. This was the Lions side that played against the Lions side last week, and they lost 56-14, scoring 2 tries. In this team, they had a sum total of 3 players who are actually Springbok capped. And that is not what I'm saying. It's 2 players. 2 players that are Springbok capped. That is Ruandrea and Jambo Lengo. Those are the only players in that Sigma Lions side who were actually capped, are Springbok capped. And I think together they had about 6 caps, I think, together. That was what they had. The average age was about 24, was the average age of the Sigma Lions side. Okay? Then we look at what the Lions side could look like next year. In the United Rugby Championship, so looking at this side, looking at Tutuka Hall and stuff like that, this is what the Lions side were missing and could look at the start of the United Rugby Championship next season. And that is over here. So you suddenly look at this side, and that's Jaco Kriel back in the side. That's Andrew Warner, who was injured, back in the side. Alton Yankees with the Springboks back in that side. Courtnall Kassan injured, back in the side. Wandisia Similani with the Springboks back in that side. Tian Swanepoel injured, back in that side. Willem Alberts injured, back in the side. MJ Pulsar wasn't quite ready, back in the side. Johnny Lombard injured, back in the side. So all of a sudden, you've got somebody like Sibusiso Sangweni, who's been so good for the Lions. He might not even make the best Lions 23 next season. So that kind of puts you in perspective. In comparison, the British and Irish Lions, first of all, which are a side made of 4 units, the best of the 4 units, they are missing. There are 2 players that were unavailable for this Lions team, and they were replaced before we even sort of came on tour. That was what they were missing. So they could have been named whoever they want. So if we look at a similar thing at the Sharks, that is the Sharks side that faced the Lions on Wednesday. I won't look at the Sharks side today. It's just the Sharks side that's faced on Wednesday. The Sharks side was supposed to be for that fixture. Okay, so you look at that side, and you're looking at a lot of youngsters. I mean, another 22-year-old captain over there. And then we look at what the Sharks side could look like come United Rugby Championship. Suddenly, you're adding Oxenchair. You could be adding Bongi Manambi towards the end of the year. You're adding Thomas Tutoy. It's a whole new front row. Springbok front row. 2 World Cup winners in that front row. Look at the loose trio. And that's even that's if you decide not to play, somebody like Dylan Richardson, who was a stellar performer yesterday. You could be adding Siya Kolisi, Springbok captain, to that loose trio, bringing back Sikamoze Noche from injury. Sinena Hamba currently with the Springbok squad. We can have Jaden Henderson on the bench. Makazolo Mapimpi, World Cup winner, starting at number 11. Spoon Corsi, World Cup winner at 14. Lekanyo a World Cup winner at 13. Number 12, there's no Andre Estesen from last year, so maybe Mario Slow. Aprile Fassi currently with the Springboks. You could have Yao Penkna, who's currently with the Springboks at the moment on the bench for the Sharks. Pixie Buthelezi has been fantastic for the Sharks. He could be on the bench come the United Rugby Championship. I don't think so, but he could be on the bench. That just sort of shows you the difference. And the reason I think it's interesting to look at that is we're going to look at what the New Zealand teams looked like when they played against the British and Irish Lions back in 2017. And this is what they looked like. This is the New Zealand sides that played against the British and Irish Lions. Okay, so first up, the Blues won 20 points to 16. That was quite a memorable game that you can remember. Lots of people always sort of point to that. But the Highlanders also beat the British and Irish Lions. But let's look at some of the players that were playing in this Blue side. Sonny Bill Williams, Rico Ione scored a try that day. Sonny Bill Williams set up Ahaya West, who actually I think played for the Maori All Blacks as well. And we'll look at this and the Springboks. I mean, we'll look at the New Zealand squad as well, to sort of give you an idea of how many of the players in these squads then joined up with the All Black squad and played against the British and Irish Lions. That's a big difference. There were no Springbok players available to our local units for this series, whereas in the All Black series, in the New Zealand tour back in the day, Sonny Williams, Rico Ione, those are 2 massive players for the Blues back then in that 20 points to 16 victory. The Crusaders lost 12-13. Now they lost whilst having Israel Dag, Jack Goodhue, David Havili, George Bridge, Richie Mahonga, Joe Moody, Cody Taylor, Owen Franks, Sam Whitelock as captain, Matt Todd, Mitchell Drummer on the bench. That is the Crusaders, White Crockett on the bench. That is the Crusaders side that lost to the British and Irish Lions. Yes, no, you're not the same sort of scoreline, but look at all the All Blacks listed in there. We'll actually look at and we're going to look at the All Black squad to sort of give you an idea of how many of these players went up and actually linked up with the All Black side, which actually still didn't beat the British and Irish Lions. It was a drawn series. Then the Highlanders beat the British and Irish Lions by just 1 point. Look at some of the players available. Wasaki Noholo, Tavita Lee, Lima Superwaga. Remember the sort of the form that Superwaga was in. Some Luke Whitelock at number 8 there, very, very good players. So some massive players. Marty Banks off the bench for the Highlanders. There are some really, really good players there. I mean, Malachi Fekitoa in the midfield for the Highlanders up against the British and Irish Lions. That would be the same as having the Kanyo for the Sharks available. It's the same as having, Wandisile Similani available for the Lions. It's having P. Steph Toy available for the Stormers, but we don't. We don't have them available. We look, and I'm going to include the Maori All Blacks in here because I think if you look at the Maori All Blacks, it's kind of a similar thing to the SAA. Not quite the same because obviously, Maori All Blacks are New Zealand players who've got Maori heritage, And the SA team is just a second team from the Springboks. But look at some of the players that lost 32 points to 10, by the way. 32 points. They lost by 22 points whilst having James Lowe, Milner Scudder, Matt Proctor, Rico Ione, Damien McKenzie, Kerr Barlow, Ash Dixon, Ben May, Joe Wheeler, Tom Franklin, Akira Ione, Elliot Dixon, Liam Messam. On the bench they had a higher West once again. A really, really good player. That side, with those sort of players, still lost by 22 points to the British and Irish Lions 2017. The Chiefs got pumped by 28 points whilst having, Nana Williams, the likes of Mitchell Brown, Stephen Donald, Liam Messam off the bench there. So that Chiefs side, with all, but by this stage, so ironically, by this stage, a lot of the New Zealand players weren't available. All of a sudden, they weren't available. And that's why if you look at the Hurricanes, they didn't have a couple of players who also weren't available. But those sort of sides, and they get pumped 34-36. So 34 points to 6. And then the Hurricanes drew 31 all against the British and Irish Lions. They had Ngani Laumape, Julian Sevilla, Nehe Milner-Skudder, Geordie Barrett, Brad Shields captaining, Vai Fafita, Corey Jane off the bench, Wes Goosen off the bench. That is the type of sort of the players, James Blackwell, some proper players back in that Hurricane side that managed to draw to the British and Irish Lions. So just remember some of those major names. This was the New Zealand squad that then, first of all, a 33-man New Zealand squad, by the way, 13 players fewer. So that's 13 players. If non-COVID times, the Springboks would have probably named about a 33-man squad. That is 13 more players that could have been available to our local unions. Think the fringe players. Think Fassi. Think Penke. Think Similani. Think Skari Intabeni. Think something like Marco van Staden, Marvin Ori. Those sort of players being back with our local unions. So if we look at this list, think of some of the names that we just saw in those games. That had already played the British and Irish Lions for their unions. Dan Coles, Cody Taylor, White Crockett, Owen Franks, Joe Moody, Luke Kamal, I think played. What time played against them? Kieran Reid, I don't think he played, but and in the backline, Kobalo played. I think TJ Perenara played. Superwaga played, Laumape played, Antonina Brown played, Sonny Bill Williams played, Geordie Barrett played, Israel Dag played, Rico Ione, Wasaki Nohola, Julius Sevilla. Those players all played for their unions against the British and Irish Lions. So the point is, when everybody's sort of sitting there saying, why is this happening? Our unions are in the mud. This is an embarrassment. It's not great. It's not good. And I'm not going to make excuses and say that we should be happy with it. But what did we expect? What did we expect when we've got unions without any of the Springboks available, an extended Springbok squad, which is much bigger than what we usually see, and we are seeing unions who literally a year ago, all their best players were given opportunity. SA Rugby said, if you would like to go overseas and earn money, you can do that. You can walk away from contracts. 118 South African players playing outside this country. You don't have that problem in New Zealand. Because if you decide to play overseas, you sacrifice a chance playing for the All Blacks. Whereas Springboks, you can play overseas and play for the Springboks. So why are you staying here? You're going over there for the money. So when you think about those sort of factors, it's a whole different game. I'm telling you right now, this Sharks team goes and plays the British and Irish Lions. They do not get pumped 71 points to 31. That does not happen. That was basically a C team with the Sharks last night. On Wednesday, very much a B team. And how many of the players from yesterday get into this team? I'm seeing not one, actually, not one. So not a single player that played for the Sharks yesterday gets into probably the Sharks' top 15 players. Off the bench from yesterday, who from yesterday gets onto the bench of potentially a potential Sharks 23? You probably put Dylan Richardson into this. He actually might get into a starting lineup. But maybe Lionel Cornier and Jaden Henson from yesterday maybe gets into the bench, or he could start. So perspective is all that I'm saying. I think that it's naive to sit there and think that you're comparing apples with apples if you're looking at the 2009 series, where we had a really, really strong unions. I mean, that was back when we were challenging for Super Rugby, when all our players were playing in South Africa. Very, very few players were overseas. And you had a smaller Springbok squad that wasn't involved. It's very different to 2017, where all the All Blacks, most of them, almost all of them, were available for their unions for the British and Irish Lions games. So you put all these sort of factors together, and it starts to make sense. So that's why I can't understand people who sit there saying that, it shows you how bad our rugby is, how how big of a problem, how weak our local unions are. Yes, our local unions may be weak. I think that part can probably stand. But we'll have to wait and see what happens in the United Rugby Championship. And obviously, once you start adding in all the Springbok stuff like that, it's a whole different kettle of fish. But don't sit there and say that it shows you that South Africa rugby's in the mud, because it doesn't. It really, really doesn't. If the Springboks go and beat the British and Irish Lions, for example, that's something that the All Blacks couldn't do 4 years ago. Yes, there's a referee call and all that rubbish, but that kind of shows you. That's something Australia couldn't do. South Africa were the last side to beat the British and Irish Lions in a series, 2009, and we can go do that again this year. So even if they don't win, you can also understand a lot of facts towards them. One game between the World Cup final and pretty much almost close on 2 years later, playing against the best, a team of the best of 4 top tier nations. So I just want to sort of add a bit of perspective. And when we do an overseas barbarian side, I think it'll also be quite fun and quite interesting to sort of look at some of the players we've got playing overseas. But it just sort of gives you a bit of an idea as to why these issues are there, why it's happening, why these scorelines are happening. It's not good. It's a little bit worrying, but we're talking about players who are 21, 22 years old, playing in their first season of professional rugby, playing against players who have been nominated for World Player of the Year, players who have played in World Cup finals, players who've won, trophies everywhere. Somebody like an Owen Farrell, who's done everything. Players who've been to Pro 14 finals, who've been in Premiership finals, who have won Premierships, who have won Top 14, compared to players who were making their Currie Cup debuts a couple of weeks ago, and now they must try and compete. It was inevitable. It really was inevitable. I think the SAA game becomes much more interesting. But until we actually see the Springboks playing, until we see what happens in the United Rugby Championship, I don't think you can write off our local unions, because we just don't know where they're at. We do not know where they're at. We cannot gauge it. Bulls went over and got beaten by Benetton. They got completely outplayed. It's one match. You can't judge an entire structure, rugby structure, based on one match. For all we know, the Bulls could, bring in. They've already brought back the likes of Jacques du Plessis and Johan Goosen and Lionel Fu and Combrink. They could bring more players back. For all we know, the Bulls could go on and be contenders in the United Rugby Championship next season. We can't just judge it on one match. So I think just adding a little bit of perspective and us to, let's just not get too carried away. Let's just sort of understand, put everything in perspective and understand exactly what we are seeing on our screens. No crowds. It makes a huge difference. I can tell you right now, the Sharks, playing like they were yesterday in a packed out Absa Stadium, playing at home in the conditions they understand. It's a whole different environment to playing at Loftus with no fans, not even their stadium. There's no fans to egg them on. Those sort of things are what helps underdogs, and there's just been none of that. So it's a very, very unique tour. And people will say, and that's why some people are saying this tour shouldn't have happened. I'm glad it has happened. I think it's a fantastic experience for these players, because if that didn't happen, some of these players wouldn't ever be able to actually have this experience again. That's the main thing. But just a bit of perspective. But let me know what you think is going to happen down the tour. What are your thoughts? What are your reflections after the last couple of games? Let me know down in the comments. Tomorrow we'll be releasing a SA overseas a Barbarians team. They said we might actually do 2 teams. So make sure you smash like, subscribe to the video so you get to see that tomorrow. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steven. And as always, I'll chat to you guys very soon.